Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. It is Thanksgiving Eve 2020 and of course that puts me in DB Cooper mode, as of course the DB Cooper heist happened on Thanksgiving Eve of 1971, so it was roughly 19 years ago from today. So I was kind of feeling in the Cooper mode. I know it's been a while since I've gotten a Zodcast out. I was kind of in the middle of the last one. I'll promise to part two and I'll get that done. I started a new job 3 weeks ago, so that's kept me pretty busy. I'm lucky to have it. Got laid off due to COVID, wound up getting an even better job, so kind of in that proving myself all over again phase, but it's going well. But I promise I'll get that next podcast out and start doing that more regularly. Of course, I'm finishing up the book on the Yuba County 5. That should be out hopefully in 2 weeks. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. But that's going to be fascinating. It's going to have a lot more narrative in it than I've done before. But anyway, going back to DB Cooper, there was a HBO special on tonight, and it's focusing on four of the Cooper suspects. And I think it's actually, this show's more focused on the people that believe these suspects. And one of them's a lady named Joe Weber, who thinks her husband, Dwayne Weber, was DB Cooper, that he confessed on his deathbed to being Dan Cooper. So at least he got the name right. Of course, DB Cooper was a media screw up. And who else they're talking about? They talk about Richard Floyd McCoy, and I'll talk about him a little bit in this video. They're also talking about L.D. Cooper, who of course was brought forward by Marla Cooper, L.D.'s niece, and I think Marla's kind of that friendly face, kind of pretty blonde that I think the male producers like putting her on, so that's probably explains why she's on every DB Cooper video. That's my guess anyway. And the final suspect in that HBO documentary coming on tonight, premiering tonight, is Barb Dayton, which is a suspect brought forward by a couple named Ron and Pat Foreman. And they knew Barb Dayton, who was actually born Bobby Dayton and had a sex change surgery. I think actually the first sex change operation in the state of Washington. So that makes an interesting story, of course, and they seem like really nice people. I don't know them personally, but I know people that do know them and will attest to that fact. Really, really good people there. So I think that show, I haven't seen it, of course. Maybe people already have tonight. So if you have, let me know what you think about it in the comments section for sure. But obviously, I'm real familiar with these suspects, but it seems like this show's kind of more focusing on the people and the colorful people that bring forward particular DB Cooper suspects. So, just going through these four that are on that show. Obviously, Richard Floyd McCoy, he pulled off a similar skyjacking that DB Cooper did in 1972. I think that was March of 72. It wasn't very long after DB Cooper's jump in November of 1971. But the thing about McCoy is, and I know people that like him as a suspect always go to the fact that he was in Las Vegas. He bought gas near Las Vegas. I think the day after the Cooper skyjacking. I might be screwing that up because I'm doing three different things as far as these go. But that doesn't make him DB Cooper. It's interesting, but it doesn't make him DB Cooper. He pulled off a similar jump and he got away with it. But that still doesn't make Richard Floyd McCoy DB Cooper in my book. He's got a lot of strikes against him. He just does. He didn't smoke or drink. Of course, McCoy was a Mormon. Obviously Mormons are probably not supposed to rob airplanes either or skyjack airplanes, and he did. He asked for $500,000. Of course, DB Cooper asked for $200,000. And at the time of the Cooper skyjacking, when it happened, McCoy bragged to a friend who was a Utah state policeman that if he had done that, he would have asked for $500,000, which is exactly what McCoy did. So if you read an article by, I think it's Musica, if I'm saying that right, Farnsworth, who wrote an article about, a really detailed article about Richard McCoy's skyjacking when he did his in 1972, you can tell that this is not DB Cooper. DB Cooper was extremely calm when he did his skyjacking in 1971. McCoy was a nervous wreck. He was putting on makeup in the bathroom. He immediately called attention to himself when he sat down. He was sitting next to a guy that was being transferred, an inmate, and he immediately picked McCoy out for being, doing something wrong. So McCoy, showed him his gun that he had on him. That's what McCoy used to skyjack his flight, was a gun and a paperweight grenade. And, so obviously DB Cooper used a briefcase bomb, and DB Cooper's the one that thought of it in the first place. That was a game changer, according to FBI agent Ralph Himmelsbach, who was one of the first FBI agents on the case. No one ever thought of using a briefcase bomb. That was definitely something different. So McCoy obviously got the idea from DB Cooper. McCoy got away with the jump, but as I said, if you read that article, almost everything was going wrong for McCoy. He was successful, but he left the typewritten instructions his wife did for him in the waiting area of the airline. An agent for the airline had to go on the plane with his envelope with the instructions in it and say, "Hey, did anybody leave this?" Of course, they didn't read that note, or it would have been all over for McCoy right there. So he just got lucky. So as soon as McCoy gets out of the bathroom with his makeup all screwed up, he says, "Oh, I'll claim that. That's mine." So he brought his own parachute on, and it deployed prematurely on the plane. So everything had gone wrong for McCoy. Smart to bring his own parachute because he thought the ones that they would give him would be tracked with some kind of homing device or something like that, which was fairly smart. But everything went wrong for McCoy, and I think he succeeded despite himself. Now McCoy was in Vietnam. He did 3 tours. Decorated helicopter pilot. He was briefly in Special Forces in 1965. You always see Special Forces overused with some of these guys, like Robert Rackstraw. Robert Rackstraw was never in Special Forces. He had maybe a little bit of Special Forces training, but he was never a member of Special Forces. McCoy was briefly, I think for 4 months. I actually read his record, and that was in 65. But later he became a decorated helicopter pilot in Vietnam. I think he wanted to actually go back again, but his wife wouldn't let him. He actually begged to go back. I think he just liked the action, but very nervous guy in his skyjacking. Like I said, DB Cooper, very, very calm. This is somebody different. I mean, when you're hijacking a jumbo jet, a Boeing 727, that's going to make you nervous. You're asking for money. FBI agents could have come on there and raided Cooper, put a gun to him. He was afraid of, flight marshals being on the plane. But other than that, very calm guy. Richard McCoy was not calm. Despite having all that combat experience in Vietnam, I think he won a Silver Star, maybe a Bronze Star for a couple of his actions in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot. But he wasn't calm. He just wasn't. He didn't have that extra element of calmness that DB Cooper had. And another huge strike against Richard Floyd McCoy is DB Cooper are his ears. As you can see in the photo, he's got big ears that stick out. And those were even mentioned on his FBI wanted poster after he broke out of jail and was eventually killed in a shootout with FBI agents. But on his FBI wanted poster, it said that as one of his characteristics, that he had large protruding ears that stuck out. Well, that's important because the witness named Bill Mitchell, who was on DB Cooper's flight, who sat adjacent from him, who was said to have the most relaxed view of DB Cooper, was kind of picking him apart. Bill Mitchell was jealous of DB Cooper because the flight attendants were fawning over him. First, it was Florence Schaffner, and then later Tina Mucklow, who sat by DB Cooper for most of the flight. And Bill Mitchell was a college student at the time. He was jealous. He didn't know why these flight attendants were fawning over this old guy, in his opinion. And Mitchell was looking for something physically wrong with DB Cooper, and the best thing he came up with was what he called a turkey neck or a sagging chin, that extra skin under someone's neck, and he thought that's just a feature of an old man because he was looking for something to be wrong with the guy because he was jealous of him. And when they asked Bill Mitchell what he thought of Dwayne Weber, who we're talking about later, who also had really big ears, he said that I would have definitely noticed those ears. It's just something that he would have noticed as a jealous college student looking at DB Cooper. And he did not remember DB Cooper having big ears. He remembered a turkey neck, but he did not remember big ears. And he said, I would have definitely remembered those when he talked about Dwayne Weber. Well, Weber's ears were no bigger than Richard Floyd McCoy, so I think Bill Mitchell would have had the same thing to say about McCoy. So that's definitely something you want to remember. I think that's one of the best things to take away from the witness descriptions of DB Cooper was Bill Mitchell's comment about the turkey neck and lack of big ears. So, in fact, Bill Mitchell told the FBI that when he was first interviewed right after he landed in Seattle from Portland. He told him that. He said he remembered DB Cooper spilled his drink and that he had a turkey neck. And then he went on to, give a few more things he could remember about him. But that's a big strike against Richard Floyd McCoy. It's two big strikes. One, his ears. Two, he was nervous on his own skyjacking. When that happened later, you think he would get better at it, more calm. If you're doing it for the second time, why is he going to be more nervous? So that now brings me to LD Cooper, who is, of course, Marla Cooper's uncle. And, she came on the radar one time when she told a story about LD and her other uncle getting in a car wreck and the day before Thanksgiving, and they came to the Thanksgiving dinner all beaten up, and they played it off as a car wreck, and it was this strange story. And her mother kind of backed it up, and that's how that came about with LD Cooper. There was some DNA test run from some DNA they said they got from DB Cooper's tie, and they tested it against a guitar strap that belonged to LD. That's what he's holding in that picture there, and of course it came back negative. But Marla's story lives on, and like with so many other DB Cooper suspects, I think LD, actually that stands for Lynn Doyle Cooper. But with him, like I'm saying, with so many other suspects, I don't think it's proven that he ever jumped out of an airplane in his life. I think they said he was in World War II, maybe. It was never totally proven beyond the shadow of a doubt. Even if he was, that doesn't really prepare you to jump out of a 727 in 1971. That's just the main thing I have against LD and so many others. Kenny Christensen, I think, is a good suspect, other than the fact that the only known provable parachuting experience that he had was static line jumping experience training for World War II in the Pacific, which World War II ended before Kenny was deployed to the Pacific. So actually, he didn't even like that static line training. When he wrote to home, he said he hated it. Static line parachuting is nothing like free falling. It's the static line pulls your parachute out for you. You could have a stuffed dummy could jump static line. It's just the most basic element of jumping out of an airplane. Very low to the ground. The static line pulls the chute out for you. It's very simple. That does not prepare you to do what DB Cooper did. And also, if you look at that picture I have up of Kenny Christensen, he had some pretty big ears going himself. So that's, again, going to hurt you in the Bill Mitchell book. So, Kenny, that's what it is. So, obviously, I wouldn't be doing this if I couldn't talk about my favorite DB Cooper suspect of all time. And I'm not a hard seller. I'm really not. When I wrote this book about my favorite DB Cooper suspect, I said, and just maybe DB Cooper, because I cannot put my suspect on that airplane. But no one can put their suspect on that airplane either. It doesn't matter if it's Kenny Christensen, Robert Ragshaw, Sheridan Peterson, which I think is a good suspect. Great jumper. Doesn't look like the sketch at all to me. Didn't smoke, didn't drink, as people will know. But no one can put their suspect on that flight. Can't put mine, but I can tell you a lot of reasons why I like Ted B. Braden. Number one is people in special forces in Vietnam all pointed to Ted Braden. When they saw what DB Cooper did, they immediately thought of Ted B. Braden because they mainly knew that Ted was the type to have come up with it in the first place. Highly intelligent guy, had a GT score of 150, and if you compare that to what his IQ should have been, it would have been extremely high. Smart guy. I mean, DB Cooper was extremely smart to ever come up with a briefcase bomb and hijacking an airplane. And when the Special Forces guys in Vietnam heard of that whole thing, they said, this to us looks like a Special Forces operation. Well, Ted B. Braden was in MACV SOG. Of course, that's Materials Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, SOG for short. And Braden was a team leader in SOG, and he was an intense guy. I mean, he did a lot of crazy stuff. He loved jumping in Vietnam because he didn't have to abide by any rules. He loved pulling his ripcord under 1,000 feet, which is almost guaranteed suicide for a lot of people. But Braden was such a good jumper, he had to keep it interesting for himself. And you talk about someone that had skills. I mean, he had skills in abundance. I mean, he was already a highly qualified skydiver by the early 1960s when he was a member of the Army's Golden Arrows competition parachuting team. He was so good at it that he won most of those competitions through Europe. He was and in 1967, when he did an interview with Ramparts magazine, it stated that he had 785 logged free falls. That is a lot. That is almost doing a free fall out of an airplane every day for 3 years or something like that. This guy was just that good. He's arguably probably the best skydiver that ever lived. He had jumping in spades, so he would have not been nervous skyjacking that plane in terms of what was going to happen once he came out of the back aft stair of that 727. Another reason Braden would have been calm, not only because he was elite special forces, but he had a get out of jail free card. I talk about that in my book. I think it was a guy named John Singlaub, also went by Jack Singlaub, of course, was a general, and he was the chief of Mac v. SOG for the last year that Braden was in it. He was in SOG from early 1965 to late 1966 when he went AWOL from Vietnam and went to fight in the Congo as a mercenary. But Braden easily makes that jump, and he's going to be calm about it. But like I said, Special Forces, Vietnam, especially legends like Billy Waugh and John Plaster and other ones I've talked to. There's a guy named Jason Hardy that writes books about Mac v. SOG. He's an expert on that elite Special Forces unit. Talked to many other SOG members, and when the topic of D.B. Cooper comes up, they always say Ted Braden. They never give you a second name. They don't say Ted Braden and James Smith or anyone else. They don't say that it could have been Braden or it could have been these three other guys. And we're talking about elite jumpers that jumped into places like Laos under heavy fire at night. They would jump in. They were being hunted as soon as they hit the ground. They weren't supposed to be in Laos. That's where the Mac v. SOGs were dropped, because they were doing covert recon missions into Laos. So that's the thing about the Special Forces guys. They never, ever give you a number two. They always thought it was Ted Braden. So when I knew that was my guy, and I wanted to take it further. And one of the ways I took it further was find more photographs of Ted Braden. Of course, there was one well-known photo of him from the Ramparts magazine article. But I was able to find his nephew, who lived in Scotland, who found this awesome photo for me that you're looking at now. Now, that's a picture of Ted Braden with his mother, taken about 1975. Well, not only does Ted Braden really look like the D.B. Cooper composites in that photo, but he's got one feature that all the witnesses that said they from that flight that said they could recall if they saw D.B. Cooper again, all had one overriding feature that they all agreed on that he did have, and that was swarthiness, or swarthy, which was a term for having dark skin. They all agreed that he was a white male, but he had this dark, swarthy is the term they used, appearance. And you can tell in that picture right there with his mother, Braden has really dark skin. I don't know if that was from being out in Vietnam so long or fighting in the Congo, but he had really dark skin for a Caucasian male. You can see how dark he is compared to his mother, who's obviously very fair complected. So in addition to all that, I can say that Ted Braden did smoke and he did drink. So he had that going for him as far as being Cooper. But Ted Braden was very, Tina Mucklow said about D.B. Cooper that he was very, very polite. To be robbing the plane, she remembered that he was a gentleman. And Ted Braden was definitely a gentleman when it came to women. If you did not stand up when a woman entered the room, he'd get very angry with you. That's what his jumping partner from the Golden Arrows, Al Tyre, told me. He got so mad at Al once because Al did not stand up one time when a lady walked into a bar. That's just how Ted Braden was. So there's just so many similarities between not just how Braden looked like D.B. Cooper, he acted like D.B. Cooper, he would have been that calm. Special Forces, obviously I talk about D.B. Cooper letter number 6, which was what I call the rich man letter, and how the phrasing is so similar to what Braden uses in the Ramparts magazine article. You can go back and look at one of my old videos where I talk about that in more detail, but there's a lot of reasons, and it being the anniversary of the Cooper skyjacking, just wanted to do this video. Definitely go check out my book on Amazon.com if you want to know more about Ted B. Braden, but wanted to wish everybody a happy D.B. Cooper Day and happy Thanksgiving. Thanks.